Kia ora, and welcome back to the channel. What would you give the All Blacks as a grade out of 10 for their 2024? How would you rate Scott Robertson's first year in charge? How positive are you about what 2025 looks like for New Zealand? All of that I'm going to go into on this video. I invite you to give your grade out of 10, which I will give at the end of the video. And I will go through the results, the highs, the lows, the standout players, the areas of concern, the areas of optimism, and like I say, looking ahead. But at the end of it, coming up with a grade out of 10 for this last year, which, I mean, New Zealand had to sit with the pain of that World Cup final defeat for quite a long time because their rugby didn't get going again until, I was going to say July, but it was the end of June, wasn't it, they started? In fact, let's have a look at the results from the last year. And the first thing, I had to double check this. 14 games, really? I mean, I've heard that the All Black Rugby Union, like many rugby unions, were maybe wanting a little bit more cash. Maybe the private equity money with Silver Lake not quite working out as planned for New Zealand. So they've maximised the opportunity to make a few quid. 14 games in 2024, packing them in. And that began with a 2-0 series win against England, followed up with a comfortable win against Fiji. Then the Rugby Championship, 3 wins, 3 defeats. I was there and I was very impressed by New Zealand actually in South Africa. And the reason I went to South Africa to watch the Springbok v All Black matches was because of the time I spent in France at the Rugby World Cup with a load of Kiwi fans and South African fans, and the intensity of and mutual respect in that rivalry just made me want to go and experience it for myself. And I'm so glad I did. 2024 has been amazing. And a big part of that was those New Zealand v South Africa games. In September. Absolutely magic. Loved it. Although New Zealand lost them both narrowly, gave a good account of themselves. Disappointing defeat to open up the championship against Argentina, meaning it was 3 wins, 3 losses. In November, the one loss to France by a single point meant that it was 4 from 5 and an overall record of played 14, more than any other team comfortably. Won 10 of them, 71% win rate. Some really, really strong performances. The win against Ireland was a brutal display from New Zealand, and some disappointments as well. They were really good in defeat away in South Africa, but the loss to Argentina was disappointing. Some of the performances, that game against France, they'll feel like they should have won that. But lots of positives on the whole for what was Scott Robertson's first year in charge. As for the world ranking, they stay at the end of this year, right now, today. They are exactly where they were at the start, 3rd behind Ireland and South Africa, respectively. As for the squad, now what would you have to say about this? Obviously, 2024 has seen the end of a couple of storied careers for Sam Cane and TJ Perenara, but it's also seen some superstars emerge, most notably Wallace Satiti, who, I mean, what a 2024 he's had. And Satiti alone would be giving me massive levels of optimism for the future if I were a Kiwi, because he is just elite. He is elite. As is Cam Roigard, who got back to fitness after a long injury, didn't play since the Rugby World Cup, then came back in November and instantly looked at home on the international stage and instantly looked a cut above any other 9 in New Zealand, and looks like he could be one of the best 9s in the world moving forward, and he's young. So a massive level of optimism there for the 2 of those guys. Adding to the mix as well, Tupu Vai, who had a really strong year at second row. That looked like it was going to be a major area of concern for New Zealand, and he kind of made people feel, well, it would have made me feel a whole lot better if I were an All Black fan about that. Asafo Amua stepped up in the absence of Takeaho. He stepped up, and so New Zealand have got good hooker options, because Cody Taylor was, to my mind, the best player of the year overall. Will Jordan's amazing. What I would say, that I think, this is a strange thing to say, Scott Robertson was quite lucky with injuries. When you describe someone as being lucky with injuries, what you normally mean is they haven't had any injuries. When I say Scott Robertson was lucky with injuries, I mean he was lucky some players did get injured. Because I don't know about you, but I get the feeling that had there not been injuries to guys like Ethan Blackadder, again, then Wallace Satiti wouldn't have got a game. So I think there's an argument whilst I don't want to criticise Scott Robertson, and like I say, I thought his New Zealand team in those 2 games I went out and saw were really abrasive and good against South Africa in their own backyard. But I think there's an element of Scott Robertson, the positives from Scott Robertson's squad are by luck more than judgment. In some respects, like Tupu Vai didn't really have any other choices, and he's really stepped up and looked great on an international stage. Wallace Satiti, I don't think he was going to pick him. So I don't want Ethan Blackadder to be injured. And I actually think Ethan Blackadder's got a lot to offer for New Zealand in the years ahead. But maybe it was fortunate that he got injured, because the rest, as they say, is history. And wingers, I would say Scott Robertson wasn't very good at using his bench. That was the one criticism of the Rugby Championship. He's got better through the year at using his bench. And he's now in a position at the end of the year kind of having a good sense about what his strongest team is. There was the DMAC or Bowden Barrett at 10. There was what are the best wingers, and it was chopping and changing a lot. And now it looks like Caleb Clark, Mark Talea is the way forward. So I'd say the end of the year, it's in a good spot. Whether that was by luck or judgment, that's the position New Zealand are in. As for the work-ons, I'm going to come back to that midfield partnership. I mean, what absolutely immense athletes they are, and brilliant rugby players. Rieko Ioane and Geordie Barrett. Do they fit perfectly together? They're not Mal Nonu and Conrad Smith, are they? They're both amazing. And you would want them in the team, which is the strange thing. How do you accommodate them? And I think that's part of the reason why they've ended up in the midfield together, because they're too good not to pick. But there are too many other good players that you also want to pick. So this is the way to engineer things so you get them in the side together. But is it limiting just how deadly New Zealand can be? The flip side of that is, when Richie Mwunga is back, maybe that changes it again, and maybe that's the kind of distributor and vision, and the fly half, an elite fly half will just get the best out of all of the players outside and behind. Interesting one. Billy Proctor looks like he could be a kind of Conrad Smith classy operator, just one of those players that just kind of glides and right time, right place. Look, I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Conrad Smith. Very, very few players in the history of the sport have been as good as Conrad Smith, but you take my point. So it's going to be an interesting one to watch, that 13 shirt. I would also say the pecking order. Again, I've kind of said that I think actually Scott Robertson has fortunately landed in a position where he now knows what his best team is. But there are some positions where, when you look at the depth chart, you're not totally sure in some positions who's first choice, who's second, who's third, and that's still something that you can work out. And when you look around at other countries, the ones that really know what their best teams are the ones that tend to perform better, more consistently. I'd say Ireland have been there for a while. South Africa are at that point where they've got past that, and it doesn't actually matter who they pick. You still get a similar level of performance. And I suppose that's where New Zealand want to get to. Domestic rugby is the other one. Mentioning South Africa, you've been hearing this a lot from people in New Zealand. They feel like they're losing a certain something by not having the Super Rugby competition of old. Fortunately, the New Zealand provincial teams are good enough that they provide competition for each other. But if the level dips in the national, provincial level in Super Rugby, they could be in trouble, because the Aussie teams, with the greatest of respect, are not good enough. Steel sharpens steel. And fortunately, New Zealand's teams are really, really good. Otherwise, they could be in a little bit of a pickle. That is one to watch, isn't it? But then nothing's perfect anywhere else, as we've been seeing with all the conversations I've been having about the Champions Cup. What grade would you give overall then? I've gone for 7 out of 10. A satisfactory, if not overwhelming, performance from Scott Robertson in his first year. Lots of positives, and enough that, I mean, what would a 7 be? Like a B? Grade B? Maybe a B minus? I think that's a pretty fair score. The games against the top 4 teams, the other top 4 teams, France, Ireland and South Africa, played 4 in the last year, only won 1 of them, lost 3. However, the points difference of those 4 games, so the 2 games against South Africa, the win against Ireland, the defeat against France, the total points difference in those 4 matches, -1. So it's very, very close. The margins are so small at this level. And New Zealand, I think they are tracking, if they can really get another couple of players in certain positions, another second row that they feel really confident bringing off the bench and can have a big impact. Nail down the midfield cohesion, then I think they're tracking to win those close games. And it's going to be fascinating to see, now that we know the record at Eden Park in 2025 is going to be on the line against South Africa, how they go in that one. It's going to be amazing to watch, isn't it? So grade B, well, grade 7 out of 10, I should say. Let me know if you agree, disagree, what other thoughts you've got, where you think New Zealand are at, what the future looks like. I think it looks pretty positive. I would be if I was a Kiwi. There you go. There's my thoughts. Your thoughts in the comments down below. Give the video a thumbs up. Hit subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. I am doing these, by the way, every country alphabetically. So Scotland tomorrow, South Africa Friday, and then I will look at some of the teams outside the top 10 after that. Right, I'll see you on the next one.